In 1900, a group of Greek sponge divers stumbled into a shipwreck off the coast of a small island called Antikythera. They pulled up statues, coins, jewelry, the usual things you find when ancient ships go down. And then they pulled up something that had no business being there. A device covered in gears, covered in text. A machine so sophisticated that nothing like it would appear again for 14 centuries. Mainstream science calls it an astronomical calculator. What if someone built this thing? And we've been asking the wrong questions about who that someone was. This is the official story. Around 65 BC, a ship sank near the Greek island of Antikythera. On board was a bronze device roughly the size of a shoebox. Inside that device were at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, machined to tolerances that engineers in the 20th century said were barely achievable with modern tools. It could predict solar and lunar eclipses. It could track the positions of at least 5 planets. It had a dial for the 4-year Olympic cycle. Mainstream academics classify it as a marvel of Hellenistic engineering, probably built somewhere between 260 BC. They credit it to ancient Greek craftsmen, specifically the school of thought on the island of Rhodes, or possibly Archimedes himself. And that's where the official story ends. A genius Greek craftsman, a clever but isolated invention, a one-off. But that story refuses to explain something important. If Greek craftsmen were capable of building this in 150 BC, why did no one build anything remotely similar for the next 1,400 years? Where are the earlier prototypes? Where are the later improvements? It doesn't appear at the end of a technological progression. It appears fully formed, out of nowhere, and then it vanishes. That's not how technology works, unless something happened to the people who made it. In 2006, a team of researchers using 3D X-ray technology finally cracked something that had been locked inside the corroded bronze for 2,000 years. Hidden on the back of the device, barely visible, packed with tiny letters, was a user's manual, an ancient Greek instruction guide, inscribed directly onto the machine. When they decoded it, researchers found references to the Saros cycle, a 223-month eclipse prediction system so accurate that NASA still uses a version of it today. The gear ratios inside the mechanism encode the number 19. Specifically, they encode the metonic cycle, the fact that 235 lunar months equals almost exactly 19 solar years, accurate to within 2 hours per year. A craftsman working with hand tools in 150 BC cut gear teeth to encode a mathematical relationship that took modern astronomers centuries to fully appreciate, not approximately, precisely. Now, watch what happens when you look at the exoligmos cycle. The device tracked a 54-year, 33-day eclipse period that requires, at minimum, a working knowledge that the moon's orbit is not circular. The actual Greek scientific consensus at the time, from Aristotle through Ptolemy, held that all celestial orbits were perfect circles, Aristotle's model. Ptolemy spent centuries defending it. The entire Greek philosophical tradition was built around it. But whoever built this thing encoded the lunar anomaly into the gear train anyway. They knew something the official science of their era said was wrong. Drop your location in the comments right now. I want to know where in the world you're watching from, because this next part is going to land differently depending on what history you were taught. The ship that carried the mechanism was headed from somewhere in the eastern Mediterranean toward Rome. The cargo included Greek artwork, probably looted or purchased from an older collection. The mechanism's construction, based on the dialect of the inscriptions, points to someone from Corinth or a Corinthian colony, possibly Sicily. But here's the problem with that answer. Corinth was destroyed by Rome in 146 BC, burned to the ground. The population was enslaved or scattered. Whatever workshops existed there were gone. So, if the mechanism was built after 146 BC, which the dating suggests, who exactly in a scattered, displaced population maintained the knowledge to build it? And why did none of their students, none of their successors, build one ever again? There is a text called The Mechanical Problems, attributed to Aristotle's school. It describes theoretical gear systems, compound pulleys, and lever systems that approach what we see in the mechanism. And in Cicero, writing around 60 BC, there's a description of a device he personally observed that reproduce the motions of the sun and moon and planets. He describes it as something Archimedes built, and he says it with the casual tone of a man mentioning something he's seen before, not with wonder, with familiarity. That familiarity is the tell. Cicero wasn't astonished. He was explaining it to someone else, which means this was not unique. There were others. So where are they? What I'm about to share is speculative. I want to be clear about that. But I also want you to decide for yourself whether the speculation is less reasonable than the official version. Ancient Greek mythology contains a character named Hephaestus, the god of the forge. According to the myths, Hephaestus built mechanical servants, automated bronze maidens who could walk and think and assist him in his workshop. He built Talos, a giant bronze automaton designed to patrol and protect the island of Crete. Now, mythology is not history. But mythology often encodes memory of things that actually happened in the language available to people who couldn't explain what they were seeing. When Homer wrote about Achilles' shield in the Iliad, scholars spent centuries assuming it was pure poetry. Then they started finding Bronze Age metalwork with exactly the kind of layered, intricate design Homer described. The myths encoded real craft, real technique, real objects that existed. So, when ancient sources describe Hephaestus building mechanical devices, moving figures, astronomical instruments, how confident are we that it's purely allegory? Now, watch where this goes. Ancient texts from Hebrew, Sumerian, Greek, and Egyptian traditions describe a period before recorded civilization in which beings with superior knowledge walked among humans. They're called different things: Nephilim, Watchers, Anunnaki, Titans. The specific knowledge attributed to these beings across these separate traditions overlaps in strange ways: astronomy, metallurgy, mathematics. Precisely the knowledge you would need to build the Antikythera Mechanism. Göbekli Tepe in modern Turkey was built around 9600 BC. It contains astronomical alignments accurate enough to track star cycles across centuries. The builders left no trace of a culture capable of it. Then they buried the entire site, deliberately, and vanished. No progression, no precursor culture, no continuation afterward. The pattern is identical to what we see with the Antikythera Mechanism. The question is not whether ancient people were capable. They clearly were. The question is where that capability came from, and what erased it so completely that it left no trace. Drop your theory in the comments. I want to know what you think happened to the people who could build this. Something rarely gets mentioned in mainstream coverage of the Antikythera Mechanism. The first major scientific paper on the mechanism's internal complexity was published in 1974. That's 74 years after it was found. 74 years during which it sat in a museum, partially examined, largely ignored. The Antikythera Mechanism research project didn't begin until 2000. The full extent of the inscriptions wasn't decoded until 2016. That's 115 years to read a device found largely intact. Now you might say the technology to read it didn't exist until recently. That's fair. But the questions, the simple and obvious questions, those could have been asked at any point. Why does no intermediate technology exist? Why did Greek civilization produce this, and nothing like it before or after? Who else had access to this knowledge? Why did it disappear? Those are not radical questions. They're the natural questions a curious person asks when they look at something that shouldn't exist. And the mainstream archaeology establishment, by and large, has treated those questions as unserious. The device gets classified, cataloged, and filed under impressive Greek engineering. The conversation ends there. But filing something away is not the same as answering it. It's a decision to stop looking. And when you stop looking at the evidence just keeps sitting there, waiting for someone to ask the right question. A device was built, at minimum, 2,100 years ago, encoding astronomical knowledge more precise than the accepted science of its time. It disappeared. Nothing like it was built again for 1,400 years. The civilization that produced it was scattered and destroyed before that knowledge could spread. What nobody knows is where that knowledge came from. Whether this was a single genius working in isolation, or the last surviving artifact of something much older, much larger, and deliberately erased. The Antikythera Mechanism is not just a device. It is a question wrapped in bronze, And the fact that mainstream archaeology keeps filing it under answered is maybe the most suspicious thing about it. Tell us where you're from, and tell us what you think was really going on. Was this the last relic of a lost civilization? A technology passed down from something older than Greece? Or is the official story right, and we're all just looking for patterns that aren't there? The mechanism would still tick if anyone fed it the right kind of answer. Click the video on screen now, because what we cover next makes this look like the easy question.